Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're out here at Apollo Raceway today riding the 2017 KTM 350 SXF. The list of changes this year is pretty short and sweet for the 17 KTM. It's almost all handling related. It does have WP's new AER 48 air fork, which did debut on the FE version of the bike, but since the FE bike, they have gone and made a few key changes with the chassis. Number one, the head stay is stiffer, along with the triple clamps being more rigid, but then they also went to a thinner upper tube on the fork to get a little more flex. So kind of my opinion is they're trying to get a little more feedback directly to the rider at the top of the chassis, but they've also allowed the forks to flex a little more, which could allow it to, say, follow the ground and just track a little better in certain sections. They've also gone to a longer brake pedal by 10 millimeters and different brake pad materials. They've really done this to try to change the leverage you have on it and try to give it a little bit more of a progressive feel, not quite as on-off on the brake feel. And then with the suspension settings, they have a new shock setting, new fork setting, and a new damping rod piston in the fork. 350 is always an interesting bike to talk about, but at the same time, we kind of have the same spiel every year. The bike is easier to ride in a 450, but some people don't choose it for racing because of just the pure grunt of the power coming out of corners, but you have a lot of fun on the bike. So I'm just going to kind of break it down to why is the 350 different to ride the 450 and what gives it its advantage. Number one, everybody talks about the power. Yes, it's not as brutal as a 450, it's got more of a 250 power characteristic. Part of the reason why it has more of a 250 characteristic is because of the bore and stroke combination. Even though it's dead center in the CCs between the little bike and big bike, the bore and stroke are more similar to a 250. The bike revs more, it puts out less of a heavy inertia feel. So that affects everything from the handling to the way the bike beats you up and kicks you around. It just feels like it's an easier fight. Even though the actual pure weight's in the middle, it feels lighter. It also affects the front end a lot differently. The 450 will load the forks a lot faster when it transfers weight, which can make setting up the front forks more of a struggle. You're fighting between hold up and harshness late in the stroke, while the 350 really leans more towards the 250 feel. There's a lot less that goes into getting the front end really happy on the bike, and with less weight transfer, it's just easier to get the front end feel you're looking for. One of the best bikes out there for being able to just dive to the inside and feel like the front is just constantly following the ground. So, of course, the most massive improvement with these bikes this year is the fork. Pretty much nobody was really a huge fan of KTM's 4CS fork. We have gone to an air fork, which most would think is controversial, but at the same time, this is probably the easiest consumer-level air fork on the market right now. It's really easy to deal with. It's a separate function style fork. You have valving control on one side, and you have your air cartridge spring force on the other. It's really simplified where one air valve controls the inner cartridge and the balance chamber. There's a little check that basically allows it to feed both chambers and balance it out when the fork's topped out. So you just deal with one pressure setting. Compared to the other air forks on the market, this one really has good initial feel. You're not really fighting a topped out feel or real wallowy feel in the front. It just has a real good progressive initial. The only thing I could say is maybe tail hook end on the, say, the bottoming resistance could be a little bit more. I feel like with every one of these WP forks, I've gone up anywhere from 3 to 6 PSI on pressure just to gain a little bit of a overall stiffer feel to the fork, just like upping your spring rate basically. Up on the controls, the new launch control, traction control, and mapping switch all being combined into one unit makes it really easy to deal with. Traction control. KTM 350 is different on power, definitely in the 450. It's a lot more of a revvy bike. At the same time, it's really easy to ride. Traction control for me on this bike really isn't that usable unless it's really hard pack and you don't want the bike to slide. I engaged it a couple times. On the real hard pack section, it does allow you to flow more through the corner if you don't want to square under, but I felt like it was really hard on this bike to square up out of corners and get the rear to purposely slide with that engage. So it's something you definitely use depending upon what kind of cornering characteristic you like. I heard something very interesting earlier this year from the KTM crew. The 350 is the highest produced 4-stroke engine model they make, and it really shows. As a motocross model, as an off-road everything, these are great all-around bikes. They may not be the ideal situation for the racer, but realistically, for the guy out there looking to have fun, it's pretty hard to beat this bike.